Hey there, it's John Berry 555, and today I'm continuing my series of MASH retro reviews with Season 5, Episode 4, Out of Sight, Out of Mind. So, in this episode, in the middle of the night, the nurse's gas stove stops working, so they get Hawkeye to help. Mind you, typically all the stoves either burn wood or coal, except for in this episode where it burns gas, because they need to have it explode so Hawkeye can go blind for the episode. And because he gets flash burns in his face and all that, they get in a eye doctor from from the 101st evac, I believe it was, and basically he's like, well, we don't know, so you're gonna be blind for the episode. And well, not really hijinks ensure more of the episode ensues. So there's a couple things going on. One, Hawkeye is learning to see the world through just his ears rather than through sight, so he knows hearing things that he wasn't necessarily hearing before. Like, we didn't get to see it, but he talks about a rain shower that occurred off camera and how he was able to hear and heard Frank falling in it. Like, his ears became more sensitive to what's going on. In fact, that's something a lot that is kind of documented, that whenever you lose one sense, typically your other senses becomes heightened. Also, Hawkeye becomes friends with a patient who got a grenade explode right in his face and lost his sight, a character by the name of Lieutenant Shaw, who's played by Tom Sullivan, a real-life blind actor such entertainer. So they actually got a blind person to be in this episode, who actually is an actor. So that is actually quite impressive that they were able to do it, because especially there's a bad habit of not always getting people who have certain disabilities to be portraying those disabilities. Yes, actors always are supposed to be something other than themselves, but at the same time, it's also good to have those who have the actual disabilities, because they actually know how to live with said disabilities and thus can be better able to act about it. Granted, in this case, he's just sitting in the post-op bed the entire time of the episode, so Lieutenant Shaw doesn't really get any character development. That's more of just someone for Hawkeye to relate to in terms of not being able to see anymore. Though in Hawkeye's case, it's only temporary. By the end of the episode, he can see once again, except for the ending gag where he fakes a relapse and goes back into the nurse's tent so they can do stuff. But they catch him pretty quickly. They toss a mug and he effectively catches it. But obviously the gag is he can actually see. He just wanted to see without getting in trouble. But he got in trouble anyhow because, yeah, the nurses were onto him. And which actually builds off of a previous thing that gag does, because there's a previous scene where he is taken out at post-op because he was starting to fight with Frank. And BJ was confident that if he hadn't stepped in, blind Hawkeye would have been able to take Frank out. But anyhow, so the nurses take him out and bring him to, or one of the nurses, Nurse Abel brings Hawkeye to the nurse's tent, where this all started, by the way, and basically to distract him, more or less, and, and then one of the nurses, I forget which one, was going to get in the shower and complain, and Hawkeye said, I can't see anything, and in that moment, he literally couldn't see anything. But of course, then the choppers come, and Hawkeye was being himself. But nothing ever happens because, he's not being rewarded for that behavior in this episode. Which is actually kind of surprising, because sometimes they do reward some of his behavior. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they do. And in this episode, they don't reward it. And in fact, you'll see that more and more as the show goes on, where Hawkeye's more womanizing behavior is less and less rewarded by the show. Part of it is because, as I understand, Alda was not fully comfortable with that part of the characterization early on, and he gets and later in the show, he's getting more and more involved on the production side of things. So it would make sense that stuff would kind of be taken away, while more of Hawkeye's other hijinks and his skills as a doctor becomes more prevalent in the show. So this episode was not written by Alda at all. It was written by other writers who also become pretty major contributors to the show. So you can see, when you know how matches are going to end up, you can kind of see why. Yeah, you can see why in this episode they didn't reward Hawkeye's behavior, because that's the direction that the current production crew and writing staff is going to take it. Also, too, because of Hawkeye's relying more on his other senses, he actually hears the choppers before everyone else. Honestly, I kind of wish that scene was with Radar, and then Hawkeye could be like, well, you got a sixth sense. I can just heal better, or something like that. I kind of wish they did something with that involving Radar, because that's always Radar's gag. Or Radar looking over like, that's my gag. That's my thing, or something like that. But there is still a Radar plot element. More of the B plot is more about Frank Bones, actually, because he's listening to baseball games at night, so that way he can basically bet on who's going to win, and so that way he can make easy money because he knows he's going to win. Well, Hawkeye and BJ obviously know he's doing that. They tell Radar, so Hawkeye, BJ, Radar, and Klingo decide to fake a broadcast so they can trick Frank, and so now he owes everyone in the camp some money. And of course, they're mad at him and he doesn't want to pay, and he admits that he listened to the game in advance so he knows who was going to win. Honestly, it's not much of a plot per se, but it's the levity of this episode, and actually a pretty good one. It gives Hawkeye something to do. It also allows him to get one up on Frank, since, even with him being blind and probably being able to take Frank in a fight, that's just not what they do on MASH. So this is a better way of doing it. Plus, it's a more comedic way, and allows Frank to get comeuppance from everyone. And Frank also, at one point in the episode, goes to Potter to complain about Hawkeye being in post-op, being a doctor, but blind. And Colonel Potter's like basically decides, okay, he's moving back to the swamp. Dismissed, so I don't want to argue, so that way you don't argue with me. Honestly, Colonel Potter, as you can see, is in season 4 and also so far in season 5, is way better at dealing with Frank than Henry. Frank just everyone walked over Henry, let's be real. But Colonel Potter, he knows when to put the shoe down, not let Frank walk all over him. Which probably also contributes to Frank's mental decline that we see at the end of this season. In retrospect, the fact that he's not getting his way and he's throwing a temper tantrum. Which is honestly how you characterize Frank, kind of immature and never really properly grew up. And there's a lot of things we can talk about Frank's character, but that's not the point of this episode. The point was Hawkeye being blind and everything that comes out of it. The Frank bit was just to get the comedic moment, because everything else about the episode was more serious. But there's not much more to add, so you can let me know your thoughts on Out of Sight, Out of Mind in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching my latest retro review. I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please be sure to give this video a like. Also, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't done so already, and I hope to see you for my very next video.